Okay, welcome everyone. It's the cert-manager bi-weekly meeting on the 16th of May 2024. We have a fairly short agenda today, but one that I imagine will take up most or all of the time that we have. A bunch of people attending. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many faces. It's always heartening to see a lot of people join this call. I have one item as on the 5-minute announcements list. It occurs to me that I should probably give a graduation update before I actually do that item. There's not much news to give, but we do now have the required number of people who have volunteered to be interviewed for the graduation interviews that Katie will be doing. I am really thankful to everyone that's responded. It's incredible the amount of outpouring of responses we've got. I thought it would be much harder to get the requisite number of people than it would be. Katie will send out emails to the people involved in due time, and that will all get sorted. Hopefully we've got enough that even if a few people don't respond, we should still be able to hit the number that we need. So that's a good step towards that. The other thing is that next week, he says without checking, but I think it's next week, we have a meeting with tech security. Yep, it is next week, next Wednesday. That's another part of the graduation process. We'll be sort of presenting again to them what cert-manager is, which we did back during incubation. Mostly just building connections. As part of that, we're doing a security self-assessment document, which Mael has been working on. Tech security helping with that, just all good vibes. Not really anything much to report beyond that. It's a little bit of work, but it's we're getting there. As if I've not talked enough, I will go on to the actual announcement that I actually put on the document, which is that we've released csi-driver-spiffe version 0.6 today. It adds support for configuring issuers at runtime, which is kind of a cool new feature. It means that you can install csi-driver-spiffe at the same time as you can install cert-manager with no worries at all. You don't need to know the name of the issuer before you install it or anything like that. It doesn't necessarily change much, but it does help with installing it a little bit. We also tweaked a Helm value in it, which links back to a change that we made in approver policy recently, which makes it just easier to configure issuers in csi-driver-spiffe. So you don't need to specifically allow list a given issuer or issuer type. You can now just, by default, it will use any issuer, and then you can restrict it if you want to, which just makes it easier to install, really. The security impact is negligible in almost all cases. There's a lot more going on with csi-driver-spiffe, and I won't take all the time talking about it because it's also the first item on the agenda, which is a convenient segue. Ori, would you like to introduce this since you're named on the agenda item?
Sure. Hi. I'm the CTO for Otherwise. And what I added to the agenda is adding support to enable easier use of AWS Roles Anywhere with csi-driver-spiffe. Now, this is based on prior work by a couple of folks who at the time worked at Venafi, and myself together with Mattias, we did a CNCF webinar on pairing up cert-manager and Otherwise, which is another open source project to authenticate with AWS. In a couple sentences, what is AWS Roles Anywhere? Hi, Mattias. Roles Anywhere is an alternative means to authenticate to AWS IAM using X509 credentials, which fits in naturally with csi-driver-spiffe. Now, the tricky bit is that you have to do the authentication with AWS and get the access token to the actual pod. And there's also a lot of setup that needs to be done on the AWS side. So together with, there's a fork of csi-driver-spiffe, aptly called csi-driver-spiffe AWS, which adds handling for converting the X509 credential created by the driver into AWS access token, and then Otherwise is able to use that together with a webhook admission controller in order to let the pod know where the actual access token is. So I actually prepared a slide and was hoping not to remember to use it and not to say so much without having something to show. So there it is. I covered what's AWS Roles Anywhere, what's authorized, which is workload IAM automation. What I'm hoping to get in this meeting is some input and maybe approval for the general direction for what we're hoping to do, as well as guidance on how to collaborate on the details. So the tricky bit with AWS Roles Anywhere is AWS SDKs in general are not able to accept X509 credentials, or they're not able to take access tokens for AWS that are static and recognize that they're expired and then reread them. So when we just use the csi-driver-spiffe AWS, which creates static credentials, after a little while, the pod that authenticates with AWS has its access token expire, and the SDK doesn't support any means for refreshing it, except the credential process configuration, where the SDK can execute an external process to exchange X509 credentials to the access token. Mattias is linking Roles Anywhere in the comments. So what we were thinking to do in a way that's hopefully not too AWS specific is to add volume attributes to csi-driver-spiffe that let you inject external files into the volume so that we could configure, say, the AWS SDK with a credential process. With authorized, the configuration is actually not done manually, but the webhook admission controller sets up the volume attributes for csi-driver-spiffe. I know that was a lot, so I will unshare and look at faces and see if somebody looks confused.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions on that?
So just to sum up what I'm hoping to get on the general direction of adding additional volume attributes that let you inject files into the volume, is that an acceptable approach in general? And if so, how do we go on about collaborating on taking that into implementation? Obviously, we would implement it, but just getting feedback as we continue.
Yeah, Peter, you're the first one to raise your hand, so go for it.
Well, this is a simple question. So you want to inject like a config file for AWS along with the certificate to allow you to then use that information together, essentially.
Yep. The tricky bit is that we don't know. I don't want to take up all our time, but basically there's a technical detail that the AWS SDK can support a relative path, and basically we have to have the config file and the certificate together in the same folder. I realized I might be elaborating a bit too much, so.
So good. This is I'm also conscious of the time on this because I could easily spend the whole thing talking about Spiffe. It's an area of interest of mine. I think my initial reaction to this, and then I'll hand over to Houssem, is that from a very high level, something that may avoid us going to any sort of vendor-specific code in csi-driver-spiffe, but also might solve your problem, is to have some concept of a hook that runs when a certificate is renewed. You're talking about a credential sort of helper thing for AWS specifically that you could inject using some arbitrary or general file system, but would it work for us to say you can inject a step that runs after the certificate is issued? So csi-driver-spiffe will go and take that certificate and then do something with it, and then rerun that process after the certificate is renewed, and obviously require that it successfully executes before it considers the certificate to be renewed. Does that work at a very high level as an alternative approach? Like, I'm not saying one or the other.
Yeah, I think it would.
Wouldn't one of the problems be that it becomes really application specific almost? Because like the hook that you need to run for a Java application, for example, is going to be different than when it's consumed by Nginx, for example, or Apache, or a simple Golang binary.
So I think there's no real avoiding making it AWS specific in the same sense that the AWS private CA issuer is AWS specific, but if it's pluggable, then it doesn't make the CSI driver AWS specific, which I think is what Ashley was going for.
Yeah, that's simply to elaborate on my thought process there. I think if we had our time again, we wouldn't have put any cloud vendor specific code in cert-manager core. Obviously, that's got Vol, AWS, GCP, loads of others. Like that, I think we regret, and it's actually a roadmap item of ours to move away from that and have everything externalized. So I'm, on the one hand, I'm quite comfortable with changing csi-driver-spiffe to make it as useful as possible. On the other, given its level of usage, on the other, I don't want to make that mistake again if that's a possibility that we could go down. So talking about general things is my preference up until maybe we decide let's just do it anyway, you know, like I don't think anyone's going to be too dogmatic about csi-driver-spiffe given the state that it's in and the amount of usage it gets, and ultimately the aim of this thing is to be useful, right? Houssem?
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious about if you have any ideas already about how this file source will look like. It looks like it's a fairly static thing. So is it just going to be just like a config map or something you give to CSI driver and then you reference it through some kind of key in the volume attribute? Like, or is it going to be something else? Like,
yeah, so that was the thinking with volume attributes. Maybe have like a config map. Basically, it's important for it to be part of the same volume, but it's also very valuable for the volume to be part of the CSI driver and not something external that is shared.
Yeah, no, for sure. For security, I think that makes sense like that. But yeah, that's okay. Good to know. But I guess my question was: is it static enough that it doesn't need changing? Like, right, this template for roles anywhere.
So if it would be static, but per workload. So say per stateful set, which you could conceivably template that with Helm or some other tool, or with Otherwise that automates the generation of the volume attributes.
Okay, thanks.
And like the helper itself, how are you thinking on getting that onto the pods and stuff like that? Because they're going to require that to be able to kind of execute that file. Like inside that file is going to be linked to that kind of helper.
So there are two pieces. There's the config file, which is specific to this particular pod, and then the credential process helper, which I was thinking we could add from another volume.
Yeah.
You know, the path of.
Yep.
I think it would make it a bit less user-friendly to use without Authorize. So I actually think Ashley's suggestion is a lot better in that sense, because they could come all together in the same volume. It would just be a lot simpler to create a volume attribute as a human if they're all sitting in the same volume. So that's actually an idea we hadn't thought about, and I think is better.
It sounds to me like this probably reaches the level of where we would usually talk about design documents and like how to iterate asynchronously and sort of move forwards. Certainly with a cert-manager contribution of this size or this scope, we would probably require a design document. Do you think that's a good way for us to go to sort of collaborate and see where we can go on this?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I will add a link then to our design document process to the agenda. You can raise one of those. What I normally say when in one of these meetings, I say for people to raise PRs and things is it's worth pinging us on Slack, on cert-manager dev on Kubernetes Slack, because we're more likely to see that than we are to see arbitrary issues or PRs that get raised. We respond better if pinged, and it's absolutely okay to ping us.
Great. Will do.
Brilliant. So yeah, we'll work together on that. We'll see where we can end up. There's a lot been happening in the csi-driver-spiffe space recently, and I'm kind of looking for a reason for it to continue to exist, because CSI driver, just the regular one, can do the csi-driver-spiffe bit without much of a change. So we've been discussing, could we, like, is there a future where we don't need csi-driver-spiffe and we can reduce our maintenance burden by like a whole project if we just sort of stick that in CSI driver instead? There's technical details to that, and I'm not trying to open that can of worms in this call, but like it's something that is actively being thought about and worked on. Obviously, there was a release of csi-driver-spiffe today, so obviously it's actively being worked on, you know.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Did anyone have anything else on csi-driver-spiffe and AWS Roles Anywhere? General silence. So thank you for that. We will move on to the next item, which is under Peter's name, OpenShift Routes. Would you like to introduce this, Peter?
Yes. So for anyone who doesn't use OpenShift or isn't aware, I'll give very quick context. In OpenShift, you have a routes controller, which basically does the same thing as Ingress, but with a slightly different resource. That doesn't work quite the same as Ingress does, in that certificate details for the route need to be in the route resource, whereas with Ingress, they can be in a secret reference from the resource with the secret name. And then if the secret changes, the Ingress controller will find that, reread that certificate change, and serve the right thing. With routes, we have a project called OpenShift Routes, which is external to the cert-manager core project. And this behaves a little bit differently to what we call the ingress shim in the main cert-manager. So in the main cert-manager, for ingress and gateways, when you annotate the ingress of the gateway, it creates a certificate object, and then that certificate object reconciles through the issuer to create a secret, and that gets used in the resource to serve the TLS endpoint. For OpenShift Routes, we have a separate controller which again reads annotations on the route, but instead of generating certificate, which then generates the certificate requests, it goes directly to certificate requests. And when it gets the response back, it takes the certificate that is returned and injects it into the root resource itself. So it's a different way of working. Now, there's been an issue open here that hopefully sharing that says, why don't we use certificates for OpenShift Routes rather than certificate requests? The reason I think I'm talking about this mainly is because I think Mael's done a lot of work on this issue, particularly at the end, and I'd probably like to shout out he's done quite a good comparison table in terms of what configuration options are available based on which of these options you're using. But we believe that in upcoming versions of OpenShift or the next release, the routes is going to actually support referencing a secret. So it will look just like an ingress flow in that sense. So this changes my opinion on this topic. My opinion was that people were using it as is, and we should maintain that. But I'm not against using the certificate because I think it makes a lot of sense and gives a lot more flexibility when people want something that isn't supported by annotations. And what I wanted to bring up here is that Mael and I had quite a long discussion about this, and assuming that what we understand from the roadmap of OpenShift and to the root controller, if it's going to support a secret, we propose that we have like a root shim, like we have ingress shim in cert-manager core, because that would be the only custom part of it. And once it creates a certificate object, the rest of the cert-manager code base kicks in. And then potentially we don't again have a separate project unless someone really wanted to continue using the certificate request pattern, which they might do, but then that's a much more limited scope for this project here. And Mael, have you just commented a minute ago? Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm bringing it here to kind of get the opinion of the other maintainers or anybody else here about if you think that would be a good route for this. Not to create the pun unnecessarily, but yeah,
Okay,
I guess
thank
that's
you.
the summary.
Mael, did you have anything to add on that, or?
Wait, have you? So did you say, Peter, that you are proposing to add routes into core cert-manager? Is that sorry? I was writing this comment and I didn't really listen.
You're ignoring me, Mael. But yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
I really needed this comment to be here because it's really important.
Yes. Basically, the cert-manager would support the idea would be the cert-manager would support routes directly, only from the certain version where it supports the certificates from a secret and not directly in the resource, or as well as directly in the resource. But as long as it supports it in the secret fashion, then it looks like all the other patterns, because we have the gateway pattern, we have the ingress pattern, and not to I know, Ash, I think you linked me to this because I couldn't find, but I know we have this drop line, so I'll just go here to maybe reiterate it here. But cert-manager is the easiest way to automatically manage certificates in Kubernetes and OpenShift. So I hope it aligns with the core vision of cert-manager. So yeah.
Maybe the first question I had when you say that to me, I said, is routes a core API that we want to support? Because here it says the easiest way to automatically manage certificates in Kubernetes and OpenShift. But then our roadmap says that only the upstream APIs are to be supported. Is the routes API an upstream API or not? Okay, I'm done talking. I'm giving to Erik.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same. I don't think this is going in the direction that we pointed out in the roadmap. So I think the change is good to use certificate, use the same process, and actually reuse the code in cert-manager. But I see no reason to take the route API into core cert-manager. That's for sure. You can easily use an ingress in OpenShift. We have OpenShift clusters, and we actually encourage our users to use ingress instead. That will create a route, which again will make everything work. So I've been hoping for a long time for Red Hat to deprecate the route. It has some interesting features, but those could be possible, and a lot of them are, to use with the annotations on ingress, so you can get access to the features that route has, like it's like a normal ingress controller. So I would be against taking the route API into core cert-manager.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. Tim, do you have something to say?
I think just supporting routes with that reference like secrets would make sense if routes supported secrets for like all the OpenShift versions that we support. But I feel like if we add support for routes, we'll also have to add support for routes that don't reference secrets. If that makes sense. Because otherwise people will say, oh, it doesn't work with my OpenShift cluster. So I feel like it's probably best to just keep it in a separate project still. So that separate project can have all this complex logic of creating CSRs and creating certificates and so on.
Now, one thing here. It's really unfortunate that no one from Red Hat is representing this. Like I told Triluk that I needed some info on this, and now he's not here. So maybe he should be there. They are definitely not deprecating this because they are still working on this.
Yeah.
So 4.16 is going to have, yeah.
But we need, I think we should add this behind the feature flag, feature gate anyway. So we have to do the change gradually from the existing way of getting the certificate injected to the new way, which will be a lot simpler. So, I mean, people would expect this to work for older OpenShift versions, and users of OpenShift tend to be quite behind on releases. That's very common. So I think we should be prepared to support the existing route API for a quite long time.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that this would be like a GA cert-manager feature if you don't support non-secret reference routes. If that makes sense. So, I mean, we could add it behind a feature flag, and then we have to keep the feature flag for 5 years till we only support OpenShift that supports that new secret reference, which hasn't been released yet, I think, right?
Sorry, I misunderstood. Are you talking about a feature flag in cert-manager?
Yes. Yeah. So
Wow. Okay. So we would be okay introducing some CRD that isn't core.
Well, I'm just saying that if we want to support routes in core cert-manager, I wouldn't do that under like cert-manager GA, general availability, if we do not support it for all the OpenShift versions that we support.
I feel like there's some parallels here with Gateway API, right? Like we're happy to support that, but you have to sort of opt in to enable it. I tend to share the skepticism about adding this to core for now, but like I don't think it would have to be a blocker that the root CRD isn't available in like core Kubernetes, because it wasn't a blocker for the Gateway API stuff.
But there's a huge difference. Do you consider it to be the same, Ashley? I consider the Gateway API to be more coming from our upstream.
Yeah, I do. Like if we're going to level it like that, but I'm not speaking in favor of adding routes to cert-manager directly, but I don't think it would be a blocker to have the option. Like it would have to be behind a flag, and you need to opt in to use this feature. I think not even a feature flag, probably an actual flag, right? But I'm just saying it's not. I don't think it's a blocker.
It pulls in a lot of nasty dependencies. If
exactly.
You want to make it type safe. That's for
remember
sure.
this HTO PR, the one that Tim worked on 2 years ago, and that we rejected at the last moment.
Yeah,
I don't.
It was the same.
I suppose Like
I mean, we tried to use the route API in the beginning, but we left it because it was a dependency hell. Mm-hmm. That was one of the reasons. So we first migrated to unstructured, and then we said that we're going to use only ingresses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Houssem.
Sorry. Kind of butted in.
It's unstructured, Erik.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Couldn't we use the distribution thing of Red Hat to solve this problem? If it's like a dependency hell issue and like we don't want to put it in core, couldn't we make it part of the community operator in Red Hat to solve this? That it also gets distributed as part of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting shout. I think supporting this in cert-manager core for me just reaches to the level of like there's an option in the Helm chart that lets you install the controller that will handle this. Like I don't think we need to add the imports to the core cert-manager code base. It can be in a separate binary that runs in a separate pod to cert-manager core. We don't need to pollute anything to have this. To me, it's just that it is enabled in core cert-manager. Would be the question.
Okay, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
That's what I'm hoping the direction of travel will be for every issuer that we have in core and every DNS webhook. We can just move it all out and then remove the dependencies from cert-manager. but that's
the idea here is to add something to core.
yeah, but not at a Go level. Like
Okay, yeah.
Mattias.
Yeah, I see quite a lot of like analogies with like indeed the Istio Gateway API and stuff like that as well. And then to indeed a certain extent the upstream gateway API. The thing is like routes is really OpenShift specific and Red Hat specific, while Istio and gateway and then the upstream gateway API are more like upstream indeed. And it feels like we kind of need probably a general strategy for how we do these kind of things, and then we can derive almost the what we do with OpenShift routes from that general strategy of it.
And I'll say something. I want Red Hat to come in and contribute, like really, because I think it's their, yeah, you know why. They have people working on that, and they will probably, they were thinking about shipping OpenShift Routes, the project, to their Red Hat operator, but I think they are going to re-implement it in some other way. But I wish they were working with us. And right now I have this veto of coming from Trilog that said we should wait until this 4.16 external certificate new thing is coming so that we can make a decision in the OpenShift Routes project. And now I feel stuck on this. Yeah, anyways, I'm ranting about this because...
Yeah, but like Erik has said, and then I fully follow him in that one, like people take a really long time to upgrade from OpenShift. Like the current versions are going to be here for years.
Oh, Tim has his hand raised.
Yeah, not really something useful. I was just wondering, Erik, what your experience is with unstructured, why that wasn't a solution. Because that's how I would solve it, I think. I would create some kind of unstructured stuff and then do server-side apply patch, apply like half of the struct.
Yeah, it worked. It wasn't a problem, but we prefer to have type safe things, at least when it comes to a level of detail, more advanced things. So it works okay.
I mean, this probably wouldn't be that advanced. It's probably just 2 fields right now, and 1 field in the future if it's just a reference to its secrets. Yeah.
The main reason we actually went for ingresses only was that OpenShift has gradually provided the features of the route through annotations on ingress. They have been expanding that over time. And when it got good enough, we were able to control things like where TLS is terminated and, those kind of settings you prefer to be able to control through an ingress.
Yeah. I mean, we solved it already with OpenShift Routes. You just have to install an actual component. It's not a big deal, I think.
But I see the point of doing something with it because of it represents a maintenance burden, right? Because there's a lot of code to be maintained.
That's kind of what I was thinking. If OpenShift Routes uses certificates, would you be replicating logic? But thinking about it as you've been talking there, it would only have to create the certificate object rather than the certificate request, and then the cert-manager would pick up the rest of the reconciliation as normal.
We are already reusing code from cert-manager in the other projects like trust manager and approval policy. I'm not a big fan of having that dependency directly to cert-manager, the application. I have been suggesting to create some kind of library project that could be shared by the project containing the core functions, but it's not a perfect solution either. But still, I think depending on cert-manager from this OpenShift Routes project is fairly okay. So you don't have to duplicate the code. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to say?
I think so. I don't know which specific parts of the code are getting reused, and I don't quite fully understand the dependency hell, but then again, I don't have a huge amount of experience with Go, so I'm going to defer to the better judgment of you guys who have a lot more experience with it.
I think Ashley's idea was
I would have thought it could be done quite neatly with unstructured. I agree with Tim. You could even dynamically detect whether the ingress shim was running on a cluster where the routes CRDs had been installed. And it might simplify the ingress shim quite a lot if all of the code that inspected the gateway-like resource used unstructured. So it could be done quite neatly, I think.
I mean, this dynamic CRD stuff doesn't work that well, I think, because we are not able to do that for Gateway API right now. Right now, it's like a flag that you have to enable. It will fail if the CRD is not installed. I
mean, I've just done it for the first time. You can, it seems quite straightforward. You do like you use the dynamic client to list all of the API resources that are available, and you could do that periodically, couldn't you?
Yeah, so that's the logic that we didn't implement a cert-manager right now.
We talked about something similar with Gateway API, but decided against it because it has like an order of install problem where audio install could change the behavior. With routes, is that just available out the gate with OpenShift, so the order of install problem's not there?
I think what Richard is saying is Rich is also proposing to like dynamically start an informer when you detect that the CRD is installed. So that's even a bit more advanced than what we have.
What happens when it's uninstalled as well? There's all kinds of fun times.
I think one of the other things is that looking at what Mael sort of compiled here is maybe you've got some differences in annotations available between the two, and perhaps over time we'd want to kind of consolidate them into like a standard. These are the things we support over annotation, and I don't know if that would be easier or more difficult to do as one project, as like a shim in the main project, or if it is just as easy to do as separate projects.
It's an interesting thing. I think I suspect we could provide a library for mapping of annotations to certificate fields deterministically. I would think that would work. I've not played with this, so I'm hesitant to say it definitely would. I'm trying to think how to summarize the discussion here. I feel like there's not been like boundless enthusiasm for adding this into core cert-manager. I think we probably agree it's doable in some format, whether that be in unstructured or separate binary or whatever. I think it's probably achievable. I'm not sure if really we're at a point where we would confidently say that it's a thing we would certainly do. Like, I guess, put another way, it's a very safe option for us to say OpenShift Routes continues to exist and continues to be supported as it is today. That if that doesn't go away, we're not like the functionality is there, albeit with an additional install step. But it's not like harmful, I guess.
Well summarized. Sorry.
I think like a nice action item could be is Mael, maybe it seems you have quite a lot of contact with the Red Hat people. Try to convince them to come onto this call in one of the next few meetings, that they can explain their vision of like what's going to happen with OpenShift Routes, and also maybe have a discussion on how we can better collaborate within the cert-manager community and with the OpenShift team. That might be
absolutely. That's exactly what's on my mind.
Yeah,
I've been trying to reach out to some Red Hat people. Trilog has been the most helpful, so I'll continue And I forgot to ask him to come to this meeting, and I think maybe he's too busy these days. Like 2 days ago, he said he was too busy with some OpenShift release. Maybe 4.16, maybe. Tim?
Maybe more involvement in the future. Go on, Tim.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, we say we support OpenShift routes, but there's still some work that we have to do, I think. One of the challenges, I believe, is like the automated testing, which is hard since we need an OpenShift cluster for that, if I'm correct. Might be.
It's not mandatory. We already know that we just can just run the root controller as well as install the CRDs. It's not as perfect as it's not perfect because it's not OpenShift, but it's good enough to do what we need.
Do we have that as an automated test already?
No.
But it can be a collaboration again there with Red Hat, hopefully, where they can maybe provide some infrastructure where we can run automated testing on. Like, I'm just making suggestions here, but yeah.
That would be a dream. That would be great. Like,
but it has
my
to work
ultimate goal would be.
Yeah. I remember from the OLM repository, I think the tests are failing every 5 seconds, right, Richard?
The tests, the Red Hat provided CI stuff, that's very flaky.
I think this has been a really good conversation. I certainly think the action item we've got is to try and get Red Hat to join this call. That would be helpful. Getting them to help maintain this would obviously be good. We know that AWS do that with their issuer excellently well. Like having Red Hat be involved with this would be an obvious thing to do. So we'll take that as an action item. I'm conscious of time, and we have a couple of agenda items still. Mael, I see you've put in an update on Red Hat's involvement with OpenShift Routes. Is that basically covered by what we've just discussed?
Yes, I can remove this.
Sweet. So then we will skip over that and go to Adam, who's talking about repositories.
Oh, hopefully mine will be a quick one. I mentioned it in our Slack earlier, in our private Slack earlier, just how now we have access to the key Quay cert-manager organization, how it'd be good to push out images to there as well. So we're pushing somewhere without the name Jetstack in it. It's probably a little bit of twiddling our jobs, but it shouldn't be too complicated to get our things pushing to both places. I just wanted to get people's thoughts, and if there's no pushback, I can raise an issue and have a crack at it when I get a moment.
Is that basically key.io/cert-manager/cert-manager, for example? Basically push that.
Yeah, it's key.io/cert-manager is the
org.
Is the org.
Cool.
I think we definitely should do that, but we also need to do some communication about it, I feel, because I can imagine now certain people are just automatically maybe mirroring the cert-manager repo. And if we're changing kind of the repository, they will need to make changes to their side. So I think there will need to be some period where we do some parallel things and then switch over to the cert-manager one and do some communication almost.
This would be going on for months, this change, if we were doing this, like several cert-manager releases for sure.
I would see no immediate reason to stop pushing to the Jetstack one, just for compatibility. Like we can do our due diligence, try and get Jetstack out of the name of the one we're putting on documentation, but there's really no point in breaking people for breaking people's sake.
Yeah, it doesn't cost us anything, does it, to push the key Quay do cover all that.
I assume they do as well, like based on the hashes. So it's probably not even costing them anything. Tim?
understand that it's easier to push it to 2 places, but I feel like we should only push to 1 place and then have that as a source of truth and then distribute it to all the other places. I don't know. I feel like
I did think about that, but the most logical place would be the key cert-manager. I don't think key supports mirroring, so we'd have to set up a whole system, a GitHub action that like runs periodically in mirrors. Whereas if we do it at build time, we kind of guarantee the moment we release it's in all the places.
that's true.
Like if you introduce a mirror option where we can just say, yeah, mirror this upstream thing, I would just push to 1 place and set the other up as a mirror.
Yeah.
Have we considered the GitHub container registry?
We can do. I mean, I don't much care where we push. It's just get somewhere with a nice name.
I don't
And
think
who
we're
doesn't
tied.
charge for bandwidth.
Yeah, we're not tied to anything, but we are tied to not being charged for it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I the key kind of the devil we know, where things are currently hosted.
There's only anecdotal data to say that GitHub registry is any more reliable than Quay. So we ultimately want to publish to all of the different free registries, I think.
That was my main point, that we have experienced outages both with K and with the GitHub container registry. Having it in both places would be nice. More redundancy.
It would certainly be no bad thing.
I think a couple of years ago we did some research into that one. I'm not sure what the outcome was back then.
That would be super interesting to see if you could dig that up.
I prefer GitHub registry because it doesn't require you to have credentials. It uses the pipeline, token. But the challenge is if you publish it to a lot of different places, it's hard to kind of monitor how often it's being used or like see any trends, because now people are just split across 5 different platforms and they pull it from 5 different places. So like for anything like metrics, it's very hard to monitor that. Right now, it's actually already super hard. So if it's like 5 different places that we have to monitor, it will be even harder.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to split our monitoring up because we will need to, whether we mirror or we push to 2 places, we're still gonna, just to get Jessica out the name, have to have it going to 2 places. So we definitely have to somewhat handle that for two repositories, and whether we go to other ones as well. I don't really mind. I have no opinion on that. I just want to get us out of the get us the documentation updated to the point where we don't reference the JetStack. Everything is nice and clean for our CNCF overlords.
Is it fair to say that I can't imagine there will be any opposition to doing this? We have to do this as part of graduation, really, is to look at this. So definitely the next step is to, you mentioned raising an issue. I think definitely we need to document that this will happen and start a place for discussion with the community about stuff. Like maybe there's some free register we don't know about that someone might suggest that would be a good candidate or whatever. Maybe a really simple design doc. Says I feel like a design doc fanboy in this call, but like it would work quite well, I think, for at least documenting the decisions that we've made regarding this and why we're doing what we're doing in a public way.
Yep, I can raise one on the ECM repo. It'll be pretty bare bones saying we want to publish to somewhere not branded.
I think it doesn't need to be a complex thing for sure.
Initial plan, key, discuss.
Yeah, and like capturing like Mattias's point about not breaking people, capturing that we won't do that. Like anything like that will be valuable because it will answer the question that people might have in response to this. Like obviously it'll be fresh that Kubernetes have changed repos recently and people will remember that, I think.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean,
maybe
that source code for fronting multiple backend repos is actually on GitHub. If you want to do something absolutely crazy.
to broaden scope a bit further, even we could have like releases built on every commit to master, and only tag the ones that like are versioned releases, so that everyone can kind of test their own features at the moment they're merged into master. Not sure how anyone, like, what people think about that.
I like it.
I think that's a nice idea, but it's separate to what Adam's talking about. To change the subject, then every PR could be automatically have a comment added to it with the Helm instruction on how to Helm install that built version of cert-manager for the benefit of the reviewer.
Yeah, and tear it down at the end if we need to. I mean,
I was thinking that
the website, when you raise a PR on the website, it generates your staging. You could do something similar with image and Helm, but this is deviating.
just based on my feelings, I feel like it might be easier to do that using GitHub Actions. I don't know, since it's like more close together, all of it. If we also run the release pipeline in GitHub Actions, for example. I'm not sure if there's like any kind of limit on how often you can push or like how many releases you can do in any of these registries.
I use often, there's a registry called ttl.sh, which is free to push to, and it automatically garbage collects the images after a period of time. So you could use something like that.
That's really cool. I wasn't aware.
I think the problem is that that's only 2 days. Then we have to review all the PRs in 2 days time, or before the 2 days are over.
Unless there's a slash command we had to slash rebuild, or maybe we don't even build it until you run that, and you run slash stage or something, and it stages it.
Well, that's a super interesting idea and maybe an excellent topic to discuss on the next bi-weekly. We're coming up to the top of the hour now, so I'm going to sign it off. I do not have permission to stop the recording, so I'll have to ask Mael to do that. Please like and subscribe if anyone actually watches to the end of these things.
Okay,
thank you all.
Go ahead.
Thank you all for coming.
I'll stop the recording now.